Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Blue Raider Podcast, hosted by Jake Holden and presented by the Conseco Group General Contracting and Mighty Dog Roofing. Don't miss another Tuesday episode by subscribing to the podcast on all streaming platforms or catch our visual presentation uploaded every week on YouTube. Don't miss our next ticket giveaways by subscribing and following on all Blue Raider Podcast social media accounts on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Blue Raider Pod. Welcome back to the Blue Raider Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Holden, and we have a football-filled episode for you today. We're going to recap the 100 Miles of Hate game with the voice of the Blue Raiders, Chip Walters, followed up by an interview with All-CUSA tight end Holden Willis. And then lastly, we will go behind enemy lines once again with a college huddle partner that is the Bull City coordinators there for the Duke Blue Devils. Ben Bird is joining us today. But before we get into today's episode, I would like to thank our sponsors. Our new sponsor is Mighty Dog Roofing. When it comes to your home, trust Mighty Dog Roofing Nashville East for all your needs. As a veteran and locally owned business, we're honored to be one of just 11 Owens Corning contractors nationwide to win the prestigious service award. From roofing and gutters to windows and siding, our expert team delivers top quality craftsmanship and unmatched service. We're here to protect your home with pride and precision. Choose Mighty Dog Roofing Nashville East, where excellence is a tradition. Call them today at 615-MD Roofs. That's ROOFS. MD Roofs today. Again, thanks to Mighty Dog Roofing, as well as our other sponsor, the Conseco Group. Since 1987, the Conseco Group has been turning dreams into reality, whether it's pre-construction consulting, construction management, design, build, or renovations and improvements. They are here to exceed your expectations. They don't just deliver. We don't just deliver, we deliver with passion, precision, unparalleled equality. Our hands-on approach ensures your investment is maximized and your vision is brought to life. From Clarksville all the way down south to Columbia and beyond, trust Conseco Group to handle every detail with expertise and care. Ready to build your future? Contact the Conseco Group today at 615-298-9907 or visit their website at consecogroup.com. Again, thanks to our sponsors, Mighty Dog Roofing and the Conseco Group. Now, we will roll into a recap of this weekend and what a weekend was, and I'm excited about today's guest as it is his first time joining the Blue Raider Podcast. He doesn't really need much of an introduction, but voice of the Blue Raiders on WGNS. I am joined today by Chip Walters. Chip, how's it going?
Doing fine. It's sometimes it's a reaction Monday, sometimes an overreaction Monday, but it is Monday nonetheless. In homecoming week with Duke coming in, disappointing loss on Saturday, but hope springs eternal this week with another home game.
Absolutely. And I'm sure from my perspective, there will be no overreactions from this weekend. I will be as level-headed as I possibly can, because I'm sure you will as too.
That's the goal for sure. Yes.
Well, before we get into the discussion, one thing I love to start our episodes off with is we'll get the post-game opener from head coach Derek Mason.
First off, hats off to Western Kentucky. Those guys were opportunistic. I thought they played hard. They're a good football team, and you can't spot good football team 21 points, period. You look at the night, and it starts with some miscues early from us on special teams, which was unfortunate. You look at where we sit, we move the ball, offensively, but wind up turning it over on downs, and then they go down and score. I look at where we sit right now. We have to start fast, man. We have to make sure that positive things happen for us, early, and fight through this. It's something for this football team, and this football team in particular, as it looks at itself. I take full responsibility for how we come into these games. I thought we were prepared and ready to play, and with the momentum change of some of those plays, we're just not mature enough to handle all parts of it. So we have to continue as a staff to put this group in position to be better. As I look at some things, that showed up, red zone chances, man, we were 1 of 3, and those 2 missed red zone opportunities, 14 points. We had the ball close and should have, punched the ball in for touchdowns, and that shows up. We were 0 for 3 on fourth down. Not very good. For us, they were 7 to 10 on third down. And we really didn't get their quarterback, their backup quarterback, or anybody else off the spot all night. And that's not necessarily what you want. You gotta be able to win third down. And obviously, man, we have to set edges and tackle better. It's been an Achilles heel, like this season, and we have to scratch where it itches. But as I look at this football team, they may be down right now. We're all down, but we're not out to fight. So the thing that we got to do is move forward.
All right. Well, you heard it from him there. I think one thing I can always appreciate thus far in the Derek Mason era is he takes a lot of accountability. He doesn't really hold anything back. He understands some of those areas that need improvement. So Chip, I'll let you kind of take it away. What was kind of your reaction from that?
Well, I think Derek, you're right. I think he's very open in his assessments, whether it's immediately after a game or like today, he had his normal weekly press conference. It's always kind of interesting to kind of compare what the immediate reaction after a game is compared to when they have 48 hours to kind of digest it and go back and look at it. But the one thing that coaches are very they don't want to throw out there too heavily in the public arena is that injuries played a role. Well, when you look at where this football team is right now, injuries have played a role in what they are. Not that means you go to Ole Miss and win, or that you win a game against Western Kentucky. But, if you think about, in particular against Western, in a conference opponent, if you have, Julius Pierce and Jashun Bodiford in the offensive line who started in the opening game, if you've got Frank Pizant and Jakail Middlebrook available, you feel like you take all four of those pieces right there, you feel like your run game is going to be a little bit better. You also have to think that if you've got Drew Francis and Parker Hughes healthy, who they have not played yet this year, we're just kind of waiting. I know they're practicing, but we haven't seen them out there. You feel like those guys who have, how many crossing routes have they covered in their careers as linebackers? You feel like that you're going to be a little better in that situation against how Ole Miss likes to play and how Western likes to play. And then you've got a seventh-year guy in Brennan Harris who was injured against Ole Miss but finished the game and did not play. So there's 7 guys right there that you would like to have out there that you didn't. But that being said, what Derek said, in my estimation, was absolutely true, in that, you can chalk up a lot of it of the 2 empty possessions that they came up with inside the red zone, and the one at the 1 yard line. It is so true that football is a game of inches, or even sometimes seconds or inches. That, had Omari Kelly been able to take one more step, that becomes a scoring drive. But then you had, you end up with 4 snaps inside the 2 yard line and can't put it in. And that, I think, let a lot of air out of the sails. There was some hope at that point, and that took it away. But I also go back to the very beginning, and Coach Mason talked about it, and they've put a lot of effort into special teams play this year. I mean, for the first time ever, you have a special teams coordinator, and that is at the coordinator level with Luke Pascal. And then you have a miscue on the opening kickoff to where you start a drive at the 1 yard line. And even though you do drive it 59 yards before turning it over on downs, it still, it felt like it sucked some air out of the building right off the get-go. So that's a whole big, long, rambling answer to what was a very short question, Jake. But, this football team did a lot of good things on Saturday night. They put up a ton of yards. You almost had 2 single game records go by the wayside that we'll talk about, but it's I think there's a level of frustration right now among the fan base, not necessarily where Coach Mason is in his uh, building of the program, or the reboot as he calls it, but just in that that's 6 in a row to the folks up north, and that in itself, it doesn't matter who is coaching, that is the frustrating part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a fan's perspective, that's where a lot of this frustration comes from. And I want to take a step back and kind of look at this from a 1,000-foot view here. The reality is going into this season, you're looking at the first 5 games and you're thinking, 1-4 should realistically be the expectation. I think for whatever reason, the fan base or whoever kind of created this false sense of we've got a chance this Saturday. And I think going into it, you thought you do have a chance because Western looked very vulnerable, obviously, in their Alabama game. And then they didn't look, like the stars that we saw on Saturday against Eastern Kentucky. I think you could make the argument that Western probably played their best game that they're going to play all season on Saturday. I mean, that was a really good football team that came in here and they just put the beat down on and some will say with the backup quarterback. And again, that might feed a little bit of that frustration, but I would like to make the argument for those that don't necessarily follow Western that closely. Caden Camp, going into spring ball, was in a battle with TJ Finley. That's a good quarterback that we faced, and that's a kid that would start, I'd have to imagine, on 133 other Division I football teams had he been given the opportunity. So I want to make that, I say excuse, but that's the reality. I think that team was just better than us on paper, and they were clearly better than us on Saturday. But to fall back into those things, what you were talking about, the injuries, we all understand that we're hamstrung by injuries. You got to finish those drives. But to go back to kind of the nuance of those 2 drives, I thought the playbook maybe, I don't want to say closed up, but when you're on the 1 yard line, the thing I keep saying in my head is you got to sneak it. You 4 plays from the worst case scenario, you fumble, and that happened. And so where I get concerned is the execution isn't there. And Omari, and we don't have the clip here today, but Omari and even Nick said in their post game after that game is that maybe that those situations that they maybe don't have that focus and execution in practice. And that came back to bite them in a key situation, because if you look back at this game on Saturday, if you score those 2 drives, you're going into halftime, worst case scenario, 21-14. But I would assume, given the amount of time going off the clock, that it would be 14-14 at halftime, and the complexion changes entirely. So it really does fall back to those attention to details that Derek constantly preaches on. But again, I say all that, it just really feeds into, I say, the frustration that these are the little things that we shouldn't be dealing with in week 3, and it seems like we are. And another fine detail that has really, really hindered us is the tackling. The tackling is one of those things that have got to be fixed. But I agree with you. If you got guys like Parker and Drew, guys that are known for their tackling numbers, that I would assume the defense would improve. It would just have to. And luckily, Duke, a team that hasn't moved the ball particularly well on offense, you got an opportunity to maybe right the ship a little bit and kind of get that confidence back underneath yourself for homecoming.
You we were joking at the lunch table today. The goal has to be to score 27 points this week, because Duke has scored 26 in each of their 3 games to start the year. They opened up, I saw a little bit of their Elon game, and won at home, kind of pulled away late. Then we were in the hotel in Memphis getting ready for the Ole Miss game, and they had to come from behind to beat Northwestern in overtime, and then did the same thing, had to come from behind against UConn to win. They've got a quarterback who does a nice job. Obviously, we're familiar with some folks on their staff, including Manny Diaz, the head coach, former defensive coordinator here, and Justin Watts, former wide receiver coach here, and Willie Simmons, former offensive coordinator here. They're all part of the Duke staff. But, I think the football team in itself, the whole, everybody in the building has the luxury of being able to get it. Whatever happened the previous weekend, they have the luxury of being able to turn the page, move on, where us out here in the fandom, can sit here and stew on it for the next week, and they are on to whatever's next. And I think that Derek and his staff are very organized in what they do, which is most every football coach I've ever known has been. And the one thing I do like, and Coach Stock started this, and they've continued it, is they practice on Sunday, and Monday ends up being their off day during the normal part of the schedule, not the midweek part of the schedule. But they're able to go and address the issues that they had, go to the practice field and make their corrections on here's what we did, here's what we need to do in those situations, and then they start moving on to the next opponent. And so that way they kind of get all of that out of their system literally within 24 hours after the game has happened.
And some of that stuff I want to highlight too, the things that they actually did well, and I think that they're not getting credit for because of the circumstances of having a poor showing. But the offense, in my opinion, has looked to the par that we thought. I think the offensive line is still trying to find their way out with the injuries that you've already mentioned with Pierce and Bodiford, and you got Ethan Ellis, who's working through some off field things, but he's kind of getting back in the groove. And when it talk about offensive line and blocking schemes, there's so much chemistry that has to be created. That you can't just manufacture in practice. When you get in the game, things like that happen. But highlight some of those big things, like the two record-breaking performances we practically saw this week. I mean, Omari, I thought after his second touchdown, I said he's got to be near 200 yards, and sure enough, he finishes with 239, 5 short of the record. And I've said the first 2 games, I actually said preseason, this guy is going to be someone that's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. He's going to be on everyone's watch list. He needs to be if he's not. And he went to sleep the first 2 weeks. I don't think that's Omari's. I think the game plan wasn't drawn up for him to get as many targets, but we saw the reemergence of Omari Kelly, and boy, was it exciting. And I hope Blue Raider fans look forward to what this kid can bring, because when I see his game, I mean, 1,000 yards feels easy. I mean, he's already a quarter of the way there in just one game.
Yeah, and he's he obviously he already has more catches this year than he had all of last season, and he's an exciting guy, and he's being an older player, he has some maturity about him, and he said today that the relationship that he has with Nick Vattiato, that chemistry began really during spring practice, and then all during the summer when they had the player-led practices. Those were, very. They really got on the same page. And when you think about that big three of Nick Vattiato, Omari Kelly, and Holden Willis, and I think Derek talked about after the Tennessee Tech game that Willis didn't get enough targets, or Kelly didn't get enough targets. So I think there's a conscious effort to make sure that those guys do have the opportunity to make plays. That does not mean that you don't continue to use the depth in your tight end position or in your wide receiver position. And they're also something they are determined to continue to develop the run game. And, where does that go? Is it, to develop it further? Is it going to remain between the tackles, or a little more of what we saw with Terry Wilkins over the weekend, where he, trying to bump it outside, or maybe even, get Nick's legs involved a little bit more in the run pass option type of game. But Bodie Reeder has a history of having offenses that can put up a lot of yards and a lot of points, and this team put up a lot of yards, had the opportunity to put up a lot of points, and you had those 2 misfires inside the red zone. So I'm not pushing the panic button by any stretch, and this team showed a lot, and I can't wait to see it continue to play when it gets to be, you're never 100% healthy, but when you're somewhere close to it at least.
Absolutely. And I've pushed and pushed on the boards over at gomiddle.com that the fact that this is a stretch that, again, going into the year, I didn't anticipate going well at all. I mean, I thought we'd go into the bye week at 1-4, and at that turn, that's when things kind of, you really kind of judge what kind of season you're going to have. I think, unfortunately, Western Kentucky was your measuring stick game. Is this team championship contending? We got that answer. And the truth, though, is with the conference and the way the outlook is so far, Western is, in my opinion, and maybe Sam Houston State, you can make an argument for them, are the two best teams in the conference. Liberty looks extremely vulnerable, had a rough go against UTEP this last week. They weren't that shut out against New Mexico State in week 2. In my opinion, the conference is wide open, which should bode well when we get to that bye week and then we have that three game stretch over 2 weeks, because you got Louisiana Tech, you got Kennesaw State, you got Jacksonville State. Well, fortunately for MTSU and the fans, those three are sitting in the bottom with us right now as well. Louisiana Tech looks a little bit more favorable than they did in the past, but I say all this for the fans. Really, hold on, don't hit the panic button, as you said. There's a sunrise ahead. We've just got to get there. And really, at this juncture, I'm thinking if we can just get there healthy, as you mentioned, and maybe pure speculation on my part, some of these guys may be holding out for that stretch, because that's a stretch in regards to having a successful season. If you want to get to 5 wins, if you want to get to 6 wins, you've got to do really well in that 3 game stretch. So Chip, as we kind of close up on our time here, I want to hear from you as you look forward to that 3 game stretch. What are some of those areas that you think need to be addressed in these last 2 non-conference games?
Well, I think tackling is, to me, is the number one issue. I mean, we've had guys whiff, in open field areas, being able to make solid tackles, to be able to get guys, a lot of guys surrounding the ball, as Coach Brian Stewart likes to call it. He likes to populate around the ball. That's his phrase. But I thought we've missed a lot of tackles against receivers who were kind of running free, and again, being able to keep things in front of us. So I think that the continued development of the run game, and also, coaches, one of the biggest things they have is trust. And for players, they have to be able to instill trust in that offensive coordinator, or in that defensive coordinator, or in our case, the special teams coordinator. You've got to go out, and I think in these next couple of non-conference games, to go out and win, lose, or draw, you've got to go out and establish, as Derek says, the tape is the tape, and every day is adding to your resume. You've got to put some trustworthy things out there for the coaches. And, right now there's a lot of players who are doing that. There's several more who need to continue to move in that direction. But to me, I think the offense is going to be fine. The defense right now, when you've given up 100 points in the last 2 weeks, people are scoring points like they've never scored before. But and I would dare say we have ever faced 2 offenses as prolific ever as what we faced the last 2 weeks, between Ole Miss and Western Kentucky. So that's a bit of an anomaly, and from here on out, although Memphis is really good offensively, which we've seen, but everybody else is kind of like everybody else once you get into that stretch after the Memphis game, and so that's when execution and game planning and scheming and all that can really start to pay off, and go down the stretch where everybody's kind of unveiling themselves within our league of who exactly they are. And some are better than expected, some are not quite what was expected, some are almost exactly what was expected. So but within this age of the transfer portal, it is really hard to gauge a roster from one year to the next, like we had been able to do 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Great insight from Chip Walters, as always, voice of the Blue Raider. You can hear him WGNS FM 101.9, 100.5, AM 1450, as well as on the Nashville Classic Hits 93.3 FM. Chip, I've been listening to you for years. I've got that almost nailed down, don't I?
Oh, that, and we're streaming everywhere.
That's right.
Whether it's GoBlueRaiders.com, the Blue Raider Game Day app, Totally Hits app, TuneIn. We're also even on the Sirius XM app, so you can catch us there every week.
Absolutely, Chip. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to join us this week, and I look forward to our matchup this Saturday.
Thanks a lot, Jake.
The BRP is proudly partnered with Rivals Network affiliate GoMiddle.com. Subscribe for premium content for all the inside scoop on MTSU athletics, recruiting, or join our free forums to discuss today's episode and all things Blue Raiders. The BRP is also partnered with the College Huddle, a nationwide collaborative effort with over 80 Division I programs represented. Check out the website at thecollegehuddle.com to catch up on all college football content with daily articles and episodes provided by the largest college podcast community on the internet. Now joining the Blue Raider podcast is the 2023 CUSA first team tight end selection. He just had a huge game at Ole Miss where he led the team in yards and reception, and we look forward to seeing what he's capable of doing at WKU this upcoming weekend. Joining us is tight end, redshirt senior, Holden Willis. Holden, how's it going, man?
It's going good. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, man. Well, before we start diving into a little bit about the football season and it's early going right now, one of my favorite things about you is that you're from Greenback, and most people that might be listening to this have no idea where Greenback is. I know it's in East Tennessee. I know vaguely it's south of Knoxville, but when people ask you where you're from, I'm interested to know what do you tell them?
Most people, I just tell them that I'm from south of Knoxville, like you said. I'll if they're somewhat from the area or familiar with the South Knoxville area, I'll just ask them if they know where Maryville and Alcoa is at. And I'll be like, oh, I'm right there with them. But yeah, it's a really small town, so not many people really know where it's at or have even ever heard of it. So I usually just say south of Knoxville.
Right. Yeah. And another interesting fact about that being such a small area is that you come from a 1A school. So that's the smallest subdivision that you can be in Tennessee high school football. You get recruited out of there. You go to a Division I school. You win Mr. Football. I also have you down as the touchdown receptions leader in a single season. There's so many nuances that come with coming from a small school. I myself went to Eagleville, a 1A school here in Southwest Rutherford County. So I understand that, and being in the shadows of the Riverdales and Oaklands, much like you're in the shadows of Alcoa and Maryville, I want to know from your perspective, what is it like, that recruiting process and kind of outweighing all those naysayers that say, well, you go to Greenback, you go to a small school, your chances of going D1 are so limited. What was kind of your mentality going through your senior year of high school and getting you to where you're on this big stage now at Ole Miss and you're the best receiver of the game for MTSU?
Yeah. I would say the big thing was with my mindset was just trusting the plan that God had for me. Faith is really big in my life. So I try to make that the main thing in everything that I do. But coming out of a small school like that, it definitely is a little bit harder, kind of like you said, being overshadowed by some of the bigger schools that are around us. And especially, even on top of that, not many people see Tennessee as a football powerhouse state. So, and then in that, I'm in a 1A school that is K through 12, not big at all. So definitely easy to be looked over. But the recruiting process was kind of slow in the beginning in my first 2.5 years of high school. But one thing that really helped me get my name out there and stuff was obviously just what I did on tape and stuff like that in high school and making it to the state championships that we made it to and the runs that we had in the playoffs. But I went to a lot of camps. I was going to schools, performing in front of coaches and stuff, getting my name out there. And then also went to the opening and then rivals camps and stuff like that just to get my name a little bit more out there on Twitter and all the other media sites that coaches use to recruit high school kids.
Yeah, it's a tough challenge, and really that's kind of a testament to the character that you have. You go to South Florida, you spend 3 seasons there, is that right? And then you transfer into MTSU, and you're going through a coaching change much like this season. But I want to lean back on the whole, you're having to grind, get to where you want to be in life as a Division I tight end, slot receiver, however you want to define it. But you kind of you are that character personality that Derek Mason's looking for, someone that's willing to pick themselves up from their bootstraps, work hard every single day. I want to know from you, what kind of similarities do you see from yourself and Derek Mason as another guy who kind of went through the same upbringing when it came to getting into college?
I would just say the mindset that you have to have going into it, knowing that you're kind of you're set behind, kind of behind everything else and everybody else, because you don't have stuff given to you. You kind of have to make a name for yourself. Nothing's really given to you. But I will say one thing about that is I think that is in some cases better than the other, because then you get to like discipline comes along with that and all that stuff that just builds you into the person. Like your character gets built up, your discipline gets built up. You have to be strong, mentally strong to get through stuff like that. And when it does come time for like those big games and stuff like that, you're able to persevere through tough stuff because that's kind of what you're accustomed to throughout your whole life.
Right. And tell me about Mason. You know, in Stockstill, the news comes that he wouldn't be returning in the 2024 season. You know, you had the opportunity, much like everyone else did, to enter the portal. You opted to stay. You know, tell me about your first interactions with Mason. How are your feelings about him and about this new coaching staff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I knew of Coach Mason from his years at Vanderbilt. I was a Tennessee fan growing up, so I was big on the SEC and all those schools and stuff. So I knew of Coach Mason coming in. But yeah, after the first few meetings, team meetings that we had and individual meetings and stuff, it was really easy to rally behind him, knowing that the man that he is of integrity and just the man of his word and stuff like that. He's really easy to get behind. And that's the kind of coach that you want to play for, knowing that when you go out there on the field, you got a coach that's going to have your back.
Tell me about offensive coordinator Bodie Reeder. Yeah, a little bit different play style than you're used to. He really likes the tight end position, utilizes it a lot. I mean, you were utilized a lot last year, don't get me wrong, but Bodie Reeder seems to be someone that really likes to utilize his tight ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really interesting, I guess you would call scheme, because we have a lot of weapons on our offense, and his scheme and what he does, he's really good at using those weapons in different ways. We don't really have a bunch of plays, but through his scheme, it looks like a bunch of plays because we can get into those plays out of different formations, different motions, different personnels and stuff like that. But to us, it's our base plays. And he's really good at doing that and getting guys in space and putting plays in for certain people and stuff like that, and just connecting all the pieces. And he's really fun to play for.
When you tell people you play tight end, and I say this is my viewpoint, doesn't really matter or mean anything to anybody, but when you tell people you play tight end, you kind of play an untraditional version of a tight end. You know, we've seen you come out, you're not traditionally in the 3-point stance. You are part of the run blocking game at times, but when you're in the game, you're kind of a threat in the passing game. So, I mean, when you kind of define your position, would you truthfully call yourself a tight end, or do you kind of own this badge of a very versatile slot receiver / tight end position?
In the scheme, it's a tight end. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the way they use me, certain games and certain game plans, kind of depends on what the defense presents. If they're a really heavy nickel package, which is like they're going to put more like coverage guys in, then they're going to put me in the box, hand in the dirt, and we're going to try to run down their throat. But if they're a base 4-3, not as many cover guys, and they're going to try to load the box up and make us throw it, now I can split out, and it puts the defense in a tough spot for a mismatch because now they have to say, okay, do we want to make them throw and just have a linebacker guard me, or do we want to sub in our nickel package and put a nickel on him? And kind of feeding off your last question, that's what Bodie's really good at is he's able to put those like pieces together and really kind of just play off what the defense has given us. And he likes to control. We don't base our offense based off what the defense is giving us. We're going to call our plays regardless, and we're going to make the defense change to honor us. We're not vice versa.
There's so many guys in your tight end room, and you all kind of offer something a little bit different. Like Gonzalez is a great run blocker. You've got Sudurth who can do a little bit of both. You got Slade Alexander who has great hands also. Tell me about your connection with a lot of those guys and the things you're able to learn with one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the room that we got. Definitely different than last year. Last year, I think we had 3, maybe 4 guys that you would call the tight ends. And our room was mixed with also the slot receivers from last year. So it was a bigger room, but we weren't just tight ends. And now this year we have 11, 12 that are true just tight ends. And going through spring and summer and fall camp and all that with those guys, and now going into the season, we all have a great connection. We all joke around with each other. We're all hanging out with each other on and off the field. And on the field, I feel like we are a really good group for communicating. Slade will come off. I can help Slade with a certain look, whether it's in the pass game, run game. I'll come off and like Gonzo or some of those guys like JC, he can help me teach teach points like, hey, get your elbows tighter, get your hands up, get your hips through, like stuff like that. And we kind of just feed off each other and help each other.
And one of the bigger connections you got is with Vadiato. Tell me about you guys. You guys really hit it off last year. You're the team's leading receiver at the tight end position. Things are off to a great start for you so far. What about you guys makes that connection so special?
I would. When I first got here, he was kind of one of the first guys that I talked to the most, just because obviously was needing a place to live. Reached out to him, talking stuff like that, and he kind of helped me around the area and talking to different guys who may be available with the open room and stuff like that. And then, of course, when I first got here, I wanted to get out on the field and throw around with some of those guys. Nick was always inviting me to come, like, hey, we're going to go throw this day on Saturday in the off season this time. So just doing that week in and week out and stuff, and over time, just getting that connection with him, getting our timing down and stuff like that. And me and him communicate really well. And whether it's pass pro, run game, running routes, stuff like that, that connection just kind of formed over time of just constant reps and just kept figuring it out throughout the summer and like our player led practices and stuff like that. And then that just led straight on into the season.
And as I teased at the very top of the episode or our interview here, you earned 2023 Conference USA first team honors at the tight end position. Does that come with any pressure for you this season? Have you noticed any kind of change? I know you haven't gotten into conference play yet at the time of this interview, but have you noticed anything so far as the way that you're defended per se? And then you're back to yourself. Is there anything that you think you need to do to continue to grow your game going into your redshirt senior year?
Yeah, so we haven't really got into conference play yet. I'm sure that we'll be able to see that pretty early in conference play if teams are going to adjust to stuff like that. I know there was a few games towards the end of the season last year where certain teams would have different coverages where sometimes it would be hard to get me the ball, whether it was they would play in out where they have a DB on the inside and outside to where I had no choice. Different stuff like that. I don't know how it'll play out. I think this early in the season and this early in the conference play, I don't think that'll be a major thing. And like I said, our offense has a lot of weapons. So I would love for them to try to double team or scheme up how to stop me, because then that's just going to open up some of the other receivers on our team, and we're still going to be able to do what we do best. And as far as I don't think that'll change my game plan going in. I mean, same way I played last year before any of the nominations or any of that stuff is the same way I'll play this year. Football has always been like, I just love football so much. Regardless, I don't do it for accolades and stuff like that. I just want to win. Not big on how many yards I have or how many catches. I care more about key plays, whether it's a block or whether it's pass pro, whatever it is. I just want to be on the field to help the team win at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And really the most important win to most of the fans is what's coming up this weekend, or the release of this interview would happen this last weekend with the 100 Miles of Hate game. You had your first experience with it last year. Now you're in a unique position as a leader on the team. You have 60 new guys on this squad. I want to hear from a player's perspective who maybe didn't grow up in the atmosphere that is Murfreesboro, Bowling Green, this hatred that these two universities have for one another, the fan bases, I really should say. How are you able to, I mean, emotionally, you got to ramp up. It's your first Conference USA game. But as far as your teammates, is that something that you have to teach these guys? Like, hey, this game really matters. Where does that come from for players who didn't necessarily grow up in this 100 Miles of Hate environment?
Yeah. No, like you said, I definitely did get my first taste of it last year. And that game didn't really end how we wanted it to. So that kind of gives me a little bit more edge going into this one. So that rivalry kind of built up for me more so than what it was last year. But for me, rivalry games are important, and it's big. It can be a lot of momentum, especially going through the rest of the season. Really good for the fan base. I know the fans enjoy those kind of games and stuff, and there's a little bit more. You can kind of feel that on the field with the fans. But one thing for me, kind of like, especially what I've told some of the tight end groups, and then, of course, some of the guys I talk to on the team and stuff, when we're in the locker room and out on practice field and stuff, one of the big things for me is, like, to us, it's just another game. We can't go out there and play it like it's our conference championship or like, oh, this is the one we want. Because, yeah, this one matters, but all 8 of our conference games matter. and we can't look past other ones just for this one or later on down the season. Like stuff like that is where it can come back to nick you in the butt, because if you overlook, like that's like the Tennessee Tech game to start the season. We weren't looking past Tennessee Tech. We weren't preparing for Ole Miss game. We had to prepare for the Tennessee Tech game, and that's kind of the same way now. Western Kentucky, yeah, it's the rivalry game, but it's also the first conference game of the season, and that's how I like to look at it, because to me it's just another game, and that could be another win in the win column.
Absolutely. Well, Holden, I appreciate you taking the time in the middle of your season, a busy week. I know as you're preparing for Western Kentucky, obviously I wish you the best of luck this upcoming weekend and get yourself a win. But again, thanks for stopping by, and we wish you the best of luck the rest of the season.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Did you know the Blue Raider podcast has an online store? You can now support your favorite podcast by checking out our selection at our website, blueraiderpodcast.com. And stay tuned for new merchandise releases as we collaborate with athletes in NIL partnerships.
Our final guest on the Blue Raider podcast, we go behind enemy lines, and once again, it is another College Huddle collaboration. Don't forget to follow all the college football information you could possibly handle over at College Huddle on X/Twitter, whatever we're calling it this day. But now I am joined by Ben Bird. He is host, owner, founder of the Bull City Coordinators. You can find him on Twitter as well at Duke FB Coverage. Ben, how's it going?
It's great, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm glad we can do this collaboration. It's been a lot of fun getting to know all these people as part of the College Huddle.
Absolutely, and I'm excited to have you join. I just did a portion over on his show as well that'll be releasing soon, but I want to get to know a little bit about Duke. I know I spent the last few minutes talking about my own team over on your show, but one similarity between the two programs, as I'm sure MTSU fans already know about, is the new coaching change there. Manny Diaz, he was the DC here at MTSU from 2006 to 2009. He already had his opportunity to head coach once in Miami, very much similar to like what Derek Mason did at Vanderbilt. I want to know from you, how is the Manny Diaz era off to the people of Durham?
I think that we're all pleased with it. We had a lot of roster turnover, although not to the extent that you guys had. So we're breaking in new quarterbacks, new starting running backs. We've got a new old tight end, a lot of new faces on the offensive line. Some guys have stepped up defensively. We don't have the same depth that we used to have, especially at a program like Duke. When you lose the guys that we lost, it's hard to replace. So our expectations were cautious going into this season, and having Diaz and company having Duke at 3-0, chance to get to 4-0. If this team can just get to a bowl game, that's really about all that we need to see happen this year, which I think is very doable given the rest of the schedule. When you're looking at, you can hopefully get a win against Wake Forest, Virginia Tech. I'm not knocking the Hokies. They've had some issues with the way they've looked this year, losing at Vanderbilt. Carolina's been a little inconsistent, but I can't really talk smack at all. The Heels have just, they've owned us for a while since MAC 2.0 occurred. But also Florida State looking, at least today, like a game maybe you could win that you didn't think you could win to start the season. And we'll see what happens with NC State. So the path to 6 wins is there. We just have to see Diaz and company do it. And I think we're all very glad to be 3-0, scoring that cool clip of 26 per.
Absolutely. Well, I want to know the preseason poll for ACC had you guys finishing 11th out of 17th. And you kind of touched on it there. It sounds like the 6-win threshold is something that is now achievable now that you've already got the first 3 wins under your belt and you're kind of eyeballing that 4th one with a G5 opponent this Saturday. What's the assessment as far as fans go? What is considered a successful year for you guys?
I think generally getting to a bowl game, at least right now, is what we want to see. And I think fans at Duke have to be realistic. Getting to a bowl game is doable. Hovering around that 5 to 7 win mark in your average year is doable. Beyond that, maybe every couple of years you could see an 8+ win year happen. Last year could have been that year, just a ton of injuries. That could have been a year where the Blue Devils get to 8+, maybe get to 10 wins, but with all the injuries, it just wasn't feasible. But so where Duke wants to be right now is our floor is a bowl game. And I think we're getting close to being able to achieve that, which for those of you older fans, you should know that's saying something given where this team and program had been back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
So let's break down a little bit about your roster there on the offensive side. Really collectively across the roster, as you already touched on, not a lot of returners, but the area that is a bright spot, at least from my perspective, is the wideout position with guys like Jordan Moore, Eli Pancol, and you got the quarterback Malik Murphy, who has shown signs of being a good quarterback for you guys. He's kind of struggling behind the offensive line, at least that on paper. That's what I see. Tell me, from your perspective, Ben, what are the bright spots, and then follow that up with what are some areas that you would like to see get better?
Well, I think we were fortunate, even at wide receiver, which you just highlighted, we still had guys like Jontavis Robertson and Samir Hagans, in addition to bringing Eli Pancol back, who had a lot of game experience, but just hadn't really stepped up. So in addition to Jordan Moore, we've got guys who can make plays. I think Eli's got 3 or 4 touchdowns already this year. He's having a monster season. And we also had guys at running back who can make plays, but that's the unit, and it really hinges on the O-line and I think the offensive coordinator too, to be fair, that is going to have to step up. We're going to have to see more running the ball. I think the defense has been great. I'd love to see a good return game, punt return game, but that's a little secondary. Against UConn, Star Thomas seemed to step up and run the ball well, but part of the problem is we're in a shotgun formation. We do this kind of run-pass option, but Malik's just not a runner. It's just not what he does. And it's easy for the defense to key in on the running backs. Also, we have a brand new, not entirely brand new, but a retooled offensive line. It's just going to take some time to gel. So my hope is what we will see is the running game and the O-line step up and have a big, big game on Saturday.
And let me add a little hypothetical there for you. You touched on it. Jordan Moore, Eli Pancol are both, when you add up their yardage, they're over half of the receiving yardage that the Devils have put up this year. In the event that, let's say, we in TSU, which is this is far-fetched given our first, the event that we're able to lock down those guys, or we're able to limit those targets and those receptions, is there anybody else that you find that could, does the running game, it's got to be working if those two guys aren't catching balls?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, you've got Harvey, who's another good wide receiver, and you had Brown, who had a good game, who stepped up and caught that big touchdown pass on a beautiful throw from Malik Murphy. Those guys stepped up. Jontavis, I think, could step up. Also, if we can find a way to get a little more production from the tight end, we're doing better with that this year. You could see Dalmolin get some touches. But I think, a guy like Peyton Jones, who is a third-string running back playing second string now because of the injury to Moore, if Peyton can get a few more touches with Star Thomas, I think those guys could propel the team. But I think shutting down Jordan Moore is going to be very hard, and Eli is going to step up in a big moment. I mean, that's just the kind of player he is. And when Duke didn't have him last year, the staff could not find a way to replace his lost production. So I think Eli is going to continue to make plays. It's going to be very hard to stop him and Jordan Moore.
Yeah, to preview this upcoming week, I would imagine, if not one, both will have a great game. We're bottom of Division I football when it comes to pass defense. So definitely an area that the Raiders would need to key in on is Jordan Moore. But let's switch things over to Manny Diaz's defense. It's something that was obviously his specialty given his background. You've said it yourself. You've been impressed with them. The front seven looks to be, one of the best, at least in the topper tier of ACC defenses. So tell me a little bit about the defense and what makes them so special.
Well, there've been some injuries to linebacker. Nick Morris has been out, but we saw some guys really step up. Ozzie Nicholas, who came in from Princeton, and Luke Murgo, if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, I apologize. But number 34, he has stepped up and played really, really well. And over the last several years, Cutcliffe had accumulated a lot of talent on the defensive line when Ben Albert was the defensive line coach there. It just wasn't being utilized. Elko's staff found a good way to utilize, and he kept recruiting well. And so we've had some talent on the D-line, even with the guys that we lost, either through the portal or through leaving school, graduating, finally being out of eligibility. But these guys are in great shape. I mean, we know what Coach Feely has meant to the program, and they just get after it. And I think from top down, Diaz, if you watch him on the sideline, really gets fired up when there's a good defensive play. He really, really gets fired up about it. And so I think they all just buy in, and you've got talent in that secondary. Terry Moore is a safety. Chandler Rivers is a shutdown corner. I could go on. There are guys there who are making plays, and I watched some film of the Miami defenses that Diaz ran and the Penn State defenses that Diaz ran. They're very complicated, and they get after the ball, and they like to get tackles for loss. And, I mean, everybody just seems to be bought into it. So I think that's why it's working so well. It's just part of the team culture.
If we look back on after Saturday's game and we came back and we talked and we discussed what happened at the game, and I were to say Duke lost this game because, what would you say?
Well, there's one thing that anybody could say about a game that no one will say about a game because they don't want to curse anybody. It starts with an I word, so I'm not going to say it. I would say if Duke lost the game if they were looking ahead to Carolina, one. If the offense, if it was bad weather and Duke throws a lot of deep balls, like even on 3rd and 1, just run, get the yard. I mean, don't overthink it. I mean, football really, look, I've had a lot of former players talk to me about the game, and they've all said generally the same thing, is this stuff is really simple. It's just we make it more complex than it needs to be. So let's say bad weather, we keep trying to throw the ball deep, trying to go deep, and it just doesn't work. Or the offensive line just struggles to run block. I think that would be it. For the defense not to play well, maybe there's a bunch of assignment breakdowns and people get confused. I haven't seen anything like that. I don't know enough about your quarterback. Is he a really good running quarterback?
He's very capable of it. We haven't seen much of it these first 3 games as we've seen in years past, but he's definitely capable of being mobile.
Well, UConn's quarterback was mobile and caused some problems. He moved around really well in the pocket. They tried to option a couple of times. You know, they did stuff with him to cause problems for Duke. So maybe he just takes off and nobody can stop him. I'm trying to remember, but I wasn't watching it too closely. I have a vague memory that Vandy's quarterback ran a fair amount against Virginia Tech at key moments, and that was part of why that game ended the way it did. I could be wrong because I was kind of half watching it through the side of my screen while I was trying to get some work done. But if it's something like that where, you know, he just shows a dimension that they're not prepared for, that could be an issue. So I would think it would be those things.
Absolutely. And to build off of that, you know, you talked about it for them to win this game. What are those areas that you think that they need to excel in, or things that they would already be excelling in that would make them for a successful Saturday?
For Duke to get a win, you're going to have to see some consistency from that unit. You're going to have to see the team come out. And I was right. I pulled up the stats about Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech. The quarterback did run for 104 yards. So I'm not senile yet. But for Duke to get a win, you're going to have to see consistent play. And I mean, this stuff is, you know, guys who are listening to this, fans who are listening to this, it's simpler than we're making it. Okay. You have to be balanced, and you have to be balanced in all 3 units. You have to run the ball well, and you have to pass the ball well. Even Steve Spurrier was a big believer in you got to run the ball at least half the time. And then when he was at USC, they ran the ball a lot. Okay. And it worked. So we have to see more balance from the running game to keep the defense from getting gassed, if for no other reason. But also, you win games on the lines, the defensive line and the offensive line. And I think that's going to be the key. Now, it could happen that Murphy just connects on every pass he throws, and they just keep going deep and they light it up. It's possible, but if Duke wants to win this game, they're going to have to do well passing the ball, throwing the ball, and we're going to have to see more sanity in the return game.
Absolutely. Well, that was Ben Bird from the Bull City Coordinators. Again, you can find him on Twitter at Duke FB Coverage. He's got all the stuff for you, Blue Devils, in this upcoming week. Again, check out his episode where I step on and talk about the Blue Raiders. Ben, I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Glad to do it. Thanks a lot for having me on. And if any of you guys like topics from antiquity, Greece, Rome, what have you, check out my I call it a companion podcast, but it's not really a companion. It's just something I do. It's called the Classical Antiquity Side Quest. We cover topics from ancient Greece and Rome. We just dropped an episode with a professor who actually does a lot of film and TV consulting work. And so you can learn a little bit about the industry and what goes on with some of these big productions that are coming with the proliferation of streaming services. So check that out. Go to our YouTube channel. It's all under Bull City Coordinators.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Ben. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for sticking around for the Raider wrap-up portion of the episode where we will review this last week in Blue Raider athletics as well as look ahead to the next week's action. We will start things off with the Lady Raider soccer team who dropped their midweek contest against South Alabama 3-4. Big credit to Rasui Arasaki, who picks up her third goal of the season, assisted by Lauren Spanstra, who will be our player of the week honors. Spanstra, the defender, picks up her first 2 assists of the season on that Thursday matchup with the Jaguars. So the defender, hard to get those assists, but she seems to have a knack for it, finding the open player, getting the goals when they need them. Unfortunately, Lady Raiders dropped that non-conference game, but they move into conference play this week, beginning on Thursday at home against the Golden Panthers. That match will begin at 7 p.m. Again, big matchup to start your conference season there. And then they will have their final non-conference game against Alcorn State on the 22nd. That is Sunday, and that match is slated to begin at 1 p.m. Lady Raiders volleyball went to Charleston, South Carolina this last week, and they went 1-2 in their contest there, dropping the first match to Utah Tech by a score of 2-3. And then they won the second game that afternoon against the Robert Morris 3-1, and then lost to the host school, Charleston, College of Charleston, that is, the next afternoon by a score of 1-3. Andy Spies picks up her second straight Conference USA Freshman of the Week honors with her 137 assists in Charleston. Yeah, that's right. I don't know if you know much about volleyball, but 137 assists in 3 matches is pretty ridiculous, let alone she has already eclipsed the 300 assist mark in just 9 games in Murfreesboro, and she's only a freshman. So a lot of exciting stuff from Andy, and hopefully the Lady Raiders can get back to winning ways as they will travel to Virginia Cavaliers in Charlottesville, Virginia. Their first match will begin tonight at 5 p.m., and then they will play this second match on that road trip tomorrow. So all eyes on the Lady Raiders in Charlottesville. Football, as we've talked about all day today, they are 21-49 losers to Western Kentucky in the 100 Miles of Hate. Not going to harp on too much as we've already discussed in today's episode, but passing was a standout for them. Rushing still have yet to eclipse that triple figure mark since week 1, so you'd like to see that number improve. And it was the first game this year where they lost the possession battle, something that, again, I would say if the Raiders are able to win possession battles, given the defense and their ability to get off on third down or lack thereof, is going to be a big reason if they win or lose games this season. So, Omari Kelly, Player of the Week honors. I think it's kind of a shoo-in with 9 catches, 239 yards receiving, just 5 yards short of a single game MTSU program record. He also grabs 3 touchdowns, and all 3 of them were huge and much needed. Sometimes just not quite enough for that 4th one, which could have really opened the game up for us early in the game. But only so much you can ask for a guy with 239 receiving yards. So great game from Omari. Look forward to what he's capable of doing the rest of the way, because I think he's got a bright future here in Murfreesboro. So big congrats to Omari with the Player of the Week honors. And then the Duke game that we've already alluded to, talking with Ben Bird from the Bull City Coordinators. That matchup begins at 3 p.m. this Saturday, so do not miss that. I know that on the schedule, or those that may be looking at an old calendar, it says 6 p.m. It has moved up to 3 p.m. to accommodate for TV. So do not miss that, as well as it is homecoming weekend. So a lot of festivities, just some times to run down for you. You got the mixer on Middle at 9:30 a.m. The parade is going to begin at 10 a.m. You've got the tailgate lunch at noon to 2, which will run right into your party in the Grove, which is headlined by the Cadillac 3. That'll begin at noon to 3 p.m. at kickoff. And if you want to be there for the Raider Walk when the Raiders come down to touch the horseshoe and all that good stuff, shake hands with the fans, get them pumped up for their game. That'll begin at 12:45 as a part of the party in the Grove. So look forward to seeing you all there for homecoming this upcoming weekend. Cross country, they go to the Southern Showcase down in Huntsville, Alabama, hosted by Jacksonville State. The men run the 8K, and they finished 10th out of 47 teams. Brian Kiptoo and Alan Kiplagata continue to pace the men's program, going 6th and 7th in the run, respectively. You have Jacinto Gaspar, who is making his debut this season at 74th overall. Carmelo Canizaro, 116th, and Sammy Sang at 186. And then in the women's 5K, the team goes 12th of 49 amongst the group, and Odelia Jepchumba makes her debut on the 2024 season, finishing 6th as an individual. Sandra Mayau, 34th. Eleanor Tao at 107th. Nancy Mayau, 122nd. And then Haley Gorham rounds out the top 5 at 195. And then they will have a 2-week break before they go to Columbia, Missouri, and they will compete at Gons Creek. There as they would get a little bit closer to that Conference USA Championship in November as they look to repeat as both a men's and women program. Men's golf, we're going to catch you up from last week's action as they concluded their play on Tuesday at our previous episode at the Argent Financial Classic in Louisiana. The team finished at 11 strokes over par, which is good enough for 6th out of 18 teams present. But I want to make a big shout out to JJ Zimmer, who finished strong there, finishing 4th overall, just off a podium at 5 strokes under par. And then they are at the Bearcat Invitational right now as we speak, where they are currently sitting at 10 strokes over par, which is good enough for tied 11th out of 18 teams. You've got right now the young freshman Thad Whitwell tied for 6th place right now at 2 strokes under. Marcus Varjan tied for 17th at 1 over. Sheldon McKnight tied for 35th at 4 over. And J.J. Zimmer tied 70th at 7 strokes over. Competing as an individual, Oliver Baker tied for 92nd at plus 15. Then you've got underclassmen competing at the Put Me In Coach Invitational in Muncie, Ohio, home of the Miami of Ohio Redhawks. Like I said, we got underclassmen, freshmen tied for 8th, Charlie Bell at 4 strokes over. Another freshman, Owen Queener, tied for 10th at 5 over. Carter Maneth tied for 14th at 7 over. And then another freshman in 17th place, Joseph Agee at 9 strokes over. So great showing from the young guys there. Look forward to how they finish up this afternoon, and then to look ahead to the next men's golf tournament, which they're going to have a little bit of a break until their next one when they go to Florida Gulf Coast University and compete at the Island at West Bay Invitational. So keep eyes peeled for that. We will definitely get you updated next week as they conclude the Bearcat Invitational and the Put Me In Coach Invitational in Muncie, Ohio. Women's golf has themselves a heck of a week as well. They finished up the Betty Lou Evans Invitational on Tuesday of last week, where they finished 46 over, good enough for 9th of 11th. Kendall Maynard goes tied for 6th at 3 strokes over. Lainey Campbell tied 30th at 11 strokes over. Nicole Johnson tied for 48th. Ella Manley tied for 50th at 19 over. And then the Murfreesboro native Caroline Pardue goes tied for 55th at 22nd overall. And rounding out the Lady Raiders at 57th is Julia Bowman at plus 23. But the big news for the Lady Raiders is their win in Louisville at the Cardinal Cup. That's right, they finish in first place out of 15 teams in Louisville, Kentucky at 16 strokes over par. That is the first win for the Lady Raiders program since 2022, and it is the first for new head coach Lauren Walmsley in just her second tournament as head coach. So very good stuff from her. Big shout out to Ella Manley, who led the team, tied for 7th at 3 strokes over. Kendall Maynard continues her hot start, finishing tied for 9th at 4 over. Lainey Campbell tied 13th at 6 over. Abby Lee makes her return from injury, tied for 16th at 7 over. And then rounding out the 5 is Nicole Johnson, tied for 38th at 14 over. Big congrats to Coach Walmsley and the Lady Raiders on that win. And they look to continue that this weekend as they are in the Mason Rudolph Championships. And that will begin this Friday, the 20th, here in Middle Tennessee area. Next, you got men's tennis. Men's tennis got their fall season kicked off and underway. They started things off on Friday where they faced Indiana with the weather looming, but they got that one in nonetheless with a 4-3 victory over the Hoosiers. And then they hosted Tennessee on Saturday in what was a wet one by 0-6. And then on Sunday, they were able to pick up 4 wins, 4-2. One thing I will say for those that are still here tuning in with me on the men's tennis side of things, it's fall sports are always a little funny, especially these that are mainly spring sports. So mixing up some of the lineups, you don't necessarily have your whole roster here for the men's side specifically. So they're still working through some kinks, trying out some new things. So I always take all these scores with a grain of salt, but nonetheless, getting 4 wins against Indiana, same could be said for the Vanderbilt-Lipscomb combo. I mean, wins are wins, and that's always something to have underneath your belt. But I don't shy away from the Tennessee score there. I'm sure that they would like to pick up a few there, but they're still working together, getting the chemistry there, especially on the double side of things. So, but which leads me to my player of the week for the men is going to be the new addition, South Carolina State transfer, Rostislav Halfinger. He goes 2-1 this week in singles, and then he also goes 2-1 in doubles this week with his new partner, Jakob Kroslak. So I don't know if him and Kroslak are going to be the doubles when we return in the spring, but nonetheless, him and Jakob go 2-1 on the weekend. So really good stuff from those guys. And then the team will actually be splitting up this weekend. I know they have a few guys that will be competing at the ITA All-American Championships in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That will begin on Sunday, the 22nd, so we won't be able to have you a conclusion to that at the next episode, but we will definitely get you tuned in and let you know what's going on there. But that will begin in Tulsa on the 22nd, this coming Sunday. And then the others that are not competing at the All-American Championships will be up in Nashville as the Raiders will go against Belmont, and that will begin on Friday the 27th with a slew of games going on up there in Nashville all weekend long. So best of luck to the Raiders and as they continue their fall season. Then the Lady Raiders tennis, going to have to wait for their season to begin. They had their Belmont-Lipscomb Invitational canceled this last weekend due to the impending weather. Unfortunately, up north of us from Murfreesboro, they were not able to get that one in. So they will have to wait until this Friday the 20th, where they will go to Muncie, Ohio as well to face the Miami of Ohio Redhawks and the other teams that have been invited to that as well. So that begins this Friday the 20th and will conclude on the 22nd on Sunday. And that will do it for the Raider wrap-up portion of the episode. I appreciate everyone that sticks around this long as we were able to highlight some of these athletes. I always enjoy this portion of the episode because of that reason, to give these athletes a little extra time in the spotlight, let you guys know that there's more to this university and a lot of great programs too outside of just football. So thanks for tuning in. Again, thanks to our sponsors, the Conseco Group, Mighty Dog Roofing, for sponsoring the episode. I appreciate all of our guests today. If you look forward to next week, we will actually have on Brett Walker, the editor of the MTSU Sidelines, a school newspaper. And then we're still pending our player interview, but as of now, we're looking to get a fall athlete on from the cross-country team to talk a little bit about their season and hopefully their impending repeat of the Conference USA Championships this November. And then we will, of course, wrap it up with a Behind the Enemy Lines as we look ahead to the Memphis matchup with Frank Bonner, the beat writer of the Memphis Tigers for the Memphians. So, once again, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this episode. It's going to help with the algorithm tremendously. It does great things for me, so I would appreciate it if you take the time after watching this or listening, you like it on whatever streaming platform you're listening to. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to follow us on all of our socials at Blue Raider Pod. And until next time, go Blue.